that you drop your comments in the chat. Our chat moderators will forward them later on for a Q&A. So if you have questions, we ask that we wait until the end to be able to get through, because Lee does have a great presentation for us, and we want to make sure to get through that and to really engage with that until we do the questions. So we are going to ask, Roy will jump on here and begin recording this event here. And I'm going to pass off to Lorraine, who has some details to share about people who are attending for the credit for the classes from instructors, and also about the giveaways we have.
Hey, everybody. So a lot of you probably heard about this event from your instructors. Probably got an announcement this week or last week, and they've been so generous in offering extra credit for this event. However, it does come with a catch. It's if you are present and participating throughout the whole event from beginning to end. And Zoom is actually recording attendance for us. And so that report will be downloaded on Monday and sent to our instructors so that they can verify participation in the event from beginning to end and give you your extra credit. And this goes as well for the Psych-Hi giveaways. We have 2 awesome t-shirts we're giving away for this event. It is the brand new Psych-Hi It's Not Greek, It's Geek t-shirt. So 2 participants who stay from beginning to end will be randomly chosen on Monday and announced in the email.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lorraine. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We have an exciting guest speaker, Dr. Lee Daffin, the Associate Chair for Undergraduate Studies and Director of the Online Psychology Degree Program here at WSU. Many of you joining have had him as an instructor at WSU or a mentor. He has taught various courses, including Psychology as a Science, Self-Control, Principles of Learning, and he also has multiple publications, including journal articles and textbooks. We are honored to have him speak tonight and hear his expertise on applying to graduate school. Please welcome Dr. Lee Daffin.
You there? You there? Okay, there you are. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, everything just froze up. Sorry about that. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Sorry, there we go. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. It's a Friday night. A couple of you from the east side of Washington and some parts of Idaho, so you're all getting snow. So I guess we're all snowed in anyway. So what better way to spend your time than with me here in about grad school? So again, Dr. Daffin, you all know me as, go by Lee the rest of the night, please. You don't have to be so formal. I don't do that with any student I have in Pullman, Global, whatever. So this is a very dense topic. So there's a lot to cover. I'm going to try to keep within my time as much as I can, but we are here to talk about grad school and to kind of get an overview of the process. I can't cover every little detail related to it. We don't have enough time for that. People write books on it, literally, but I'm going to try to go through as much as I can. So the question is, why me? Other than I heard earlier that I'm beloved or something like that, I don't think that's the reason why you want me here right now. Just to give you kind of perspective on my background, my experience as an undergrad, I was military at the time. I bounced around from, look, if you don't know my background, you see I went to like 6 undergrad institutions. You probably start worrying about me teaching any classes. That is not the case, but I was military, so I bounced around a lot. When I was an undergrad, things were complicated because I worked full-time, as many of you do. So I relate to the global students really well. I worked full-time. In fact, at one point, I worked 2 full-time jobs and went to school full-time. When you're even working 1 full-time job, it's really complicated to try and get extra experiences, doing TAs or doing research or being a part of Psych-Hi, being a part of various different types of groups. It's challenging. And as you're going to see tonight, to even apply to grad school, you've got to have that stuff, or it's just next to impossible to even get in. In my time, I did apply to grad programs. I had a lot of failures early on. I didn't know how to do it, and there is actually a way to do it. I didn't know how to do it, so I did everything you're not supposed to do. So I think a lot of times when I do these kind of talks, that I've done them for Pullman Psych, I've done them for um, the online students in general. I've done them for Psych for Global. I like to talk about what I did wrong, so you don't make the same mistakes, and then kind of what to do right. But eventually, I did get into grad school. My initial approach was to go into a PhD program right out the gate. That didn't work. I ended up having to go into a master's program, which I'll talk about later. That's not a bad thing. In fact, that's not a kiss at death on getting into PhD programs. Obviously, I'm sitting in front of you right now with a doctorate. But I mean, sometimes there's another way, there's different routes to get into grad school. But I eventually did get in. I got my master's degree. I eventually got into a PhD program. But after I got my master's, I got teaching experience. I had research experience. I had a strange opportunity. I lived on the East Coast in Baltimore area, and National Institutes of Health was literally down the street almost. Well, not well, it was down the street. It wasn't like as close as that kind of sounds. It was about 60 miles away, almost 70, but I was willing to drive it on the Interstate 95 all the way down to the DC area. So, but I did get eventually, because of that commitment to doing that, getting research, having some teaching experience, I did get into a PhD program, but it was a struggle. It took me a while to get to that point. And when I finally did apply the third round in the PhD programs, I got picked up by 5 of the 6 schools. So I had success then. And grad school was so much fun. I've done it again recently. So now look at my signature block. I have a PhD in psychology, but I got a master's in education in curriculum instruction. So I literally went back to University of Idaho, got my master's in education, and I did it as an online student. So I taught online, and I've been an online student. So I've done everything you all have done to some degree. So I understand your situation and your challenges. Again, I'm talking about getting into grad school in general. This all applies to, anybody really. And if you're not psych, it's not an end of the world. So I'll talk about that here in a second. But there's a process to it. There's a way to do it. You can get done. You can get it. You've got to be patient with the process. So this is what we're going to cover real quick. We're going to talk about, I have a wittier title than why grad school. We'll see in a second, but it was really long and I couldn't fit it on here. So I just went with that. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about selecting schools. We'll talk about the actual applying to grad school process, what's needed. I saw a lot of your questions you submitted. I've gone through every bit of them from everybody. So I saw quite a few of those, and I addressed most of that throughout the presentation. And a lot of people had questions on that process, what you need and that kind of stuff. I'll go into the application screening process, and this is pretty universal across most, I would say, psych programs, but even beyond that. But what happens when we get your application? What do we do with it? How do we screen people out? That's going to be eye-opening for a lot of you, and it's going to be disturbing to hear. It's a little bit degree, but it's the way it operates. And then section 5 is, how do I stand out? So what do I do? So I know this was advertised, obviously, to psychology students. I know some of you are not psychology students. So, what if I'm not a psychology student? Is this going to be a waste of your time? No, because again, the process of applying what you need, that's kind of universal across programs. So everybody can get something out of it. Some of the stuff I will talk about will be specific to psychology, but overall, you're all going to get something out of it tonight. I can pretty much guarantee that. So one way to start talking about what you're going to get out of it is with your title. Should I, could I, why in the world would I, kind of when it comes to grad school. So undergraduate perceptions of graduate school are kind of interesting to kind of think about. What is it? So what is grad school? What does it look like? What are you doing here? Some popular kind of beliefs, and not necessarily misconceptions. And some of these are off and some of these are accurate. Grad school is an extension of undergrad education. To some degree, and the perception a lot of students have is those that did really, really well in grad school, undergrad, are going to go into grad school and just do phenomenally there also. There is some truth to that. Most successful undergrads usually can go into grad school, but not everybody finishes grad school. Even those phenomenal, what we call the phenomenal students, a lot of them don't make it through grad school either. It's a very difficult process. We'll talk about here in a second. Is grad school, is it more difficult, demands more time, higher standards, more hands-on? Yeah, that's true. That's a relatively correct perception. Grad students are constantly busy, stressed, and caffeine infused. Maybe there's some truth to this, but it's not as bleak as that seems there. So if you had that if you had that conception as a partial misconception, I say partial because it has truth to it also. So that's annoying. It doesn't. I can't use my arrow keys to go over. Okay, so the realities of graduate school, you can kind of piggybacking on that third comment on the previous slide. You can have a social life. Most grad students don't have much of a social life. You're not going to be out partying every night, but yes, you can. And in fact, as I tell my undergrads, whether you're global or Poland, it doesn't even matter. You got to have downtime. You got to have time to disconnect and get away from school and you go play a video game, go see a movie. I did that last night. Go do whatever, do something else to kind of get away so you can actually, when you get back to your schoolwork, you can focus on it. There is coursework in grad school, but the entire focus of the time you're in grad school isn't all coursework. You're doing research, you might be TAing, you might be teaching and stuff I'll talk about later. So coursework is important. If you're in a doctoral program, your coursework probably makes up about the first 2 years in most programs, and in the last two, you're just focused on teaching and research and other things. So, and sometimes you're in a program longer than 4 years also. Most of what's learned comes through experience and self-guided inquiry. It ain't all just somebody telling you, they want you to actually experience it firsthand. So that's kind of a little bit different in undergrad. And then grad students vary in terms of work ethics. That's true. I've known grad students that were those gun-ho, type A, perfectionists, and I've seen some that kind of just take it lackadaisical. So even you see it at undergrad level, you get some of that even at grad level. So if you're that type of person, is not that type A and those students that are kind of more laid back, the type B sort of personalities, that type. Most of us know that terminology really doesn't exist. They disproved it, but if you got the idea what I'm saying, they can be successful too in school. So you don't have to be just that type A to be successful. A's or else. That is some truth to that. In grad school, definitely C's or D's are considered F's. Even in some grad programs, some courses, B's are considered F's. So it's either A's or not. So that's kind of that's a wake up call for many grad students when they get there. They're thinking they can get that regular grading system like undergrads have. That doesn't exist. So like statistics or methods classes, they're going to be the ones that are going to be A's or else. Grad school is a lifestyle. There's many hats to wear. I'll talk about that a little bit later. You're not just doing research. You're not just doing a student thing. There's other stuff you're doing too at the same time. To be successful, you should have decent time management skills. I mean, even if you're kind of a little that type B, you let things come as they go. You got to have some degree of time management, or you're not going to be successful in grad school. You got to balance the various academic responsibilities, those hats I was talking about, because one moment you're in the classroom as a student, and then you might be leaving there and walking to a class you're about to go teach. If anybody's been in Pullman before, the 105 sections are all taught by grad students. So that literally happens. They literally come from class, whether a student, and they're walking in there, an instructor all suddenly. It's kind of if you think about that, it's almost weird to think about. That's just that role changes that drastically and that quickly too. You tend to work alone and with little guidance. Your mentors are not there to handhold the entire time, so they expect you to be independent and go out there and kind of figure things out. If you have to, you got to have coping mechanisms. Grad school is tough. Every grad student, and I'll say that I don't like making generalizations like that, but I will state that every grad student has a moment where they're like, "What was I thinking?" I had it too. Even at WSU, when I came in the first day, I forgot who she was, but the person that ran the grad school talked to us and said that, and I'm like, yeah, not me. Well, yeah, it happened. I had a moment too. It was brief. Some people have it longer, but it was brief. But every grad student goes through it. All 5 students in my cohort, only 2 of us graduated. The other one got kicked out. The other one, well, she got ran out, and then a third one left with a master's. The other one, Alexa, she almost dropped out, but I got her to stay. So I'd have been the only one, but only 2 of the 5 of us finished. So, I told you I was talking about nerd. That word's going to be in here somewhere, Leah. So, so outside of class, grad students do talk about shop. You could do it without feeling nerdy. It's a joke before you all came in. Sorry. And then everybody you interact with is going to love the field. They're going to love research. They're going to love doing these types of things. So you're around people like you, so that's an awesome thing. And from different backgrounds, but you all share these two kind of things in common. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. You're this. So that's kind of cool. And as you get into your academic career, it's the same thing there too. So the advantages of grad school, you get the rapport experience with professors. The kind of cool thing there is you got this initial role with your professor where they're your mentor. When you graduate, they're not your mentor no more. They now become your colleague. And if you ran into people like me at WSU, I was a grad student here. I stayed on as faculty. 12 years later, I'm faculty. But if you go back, my time at WSU goes back 16 years when I was a grad student. Well, that's old. I'm feel old now. Anyway, moving on. So, but these people that were my mentors, they were my professors, they are now suddenly my colleagues. That's kind of interesting. Um, you get to work in your own laboratories once you get into grad school. You have your own space. I did too. You get to work in articles that can be published at some point. You can attend conferences where you can share what you're learning. It's exciting to go to these conferences, and the students in I'll talk about 499 later, one of our research experiences. I have our students come to. If you guys want to know why I make you come here, I want you to come here to get that experience of actually presenting in person. It's not the same as doing it remote. It really is. And I see students presenting remote at Circa, the undergrad research symposium, and it's not the same as being here in person. You get that time with everybody, connecting with people. It's a fun experience, but going to conferences, you're actually presenting what you're doing. You're making a difference. You're contributing to the body of literature that somebody will go down the line, do a lit review on, and guess who they're citing in their introduction to their paper? They're citing you later on. That's kind of cool to think about. So, and then connections that last a lifetime. I still know the people in my cohort. In fact, one of them, Casey Pula, she wasn't in my cohort. She was in my lab. She's at UI right now teaching. She went away for a while. She came back to the area, but that was kind of cool. One of our, it was my office mate. He was in the class before me. He's at WSU Spokane, Sterling McPherson, doing research up there. He's an associate provost or something up there. I mean, it's really kind of cool, but you can make connections that last a lifetime. Dr. Dee Posey, who's going to be coming online more beginning this fall. She was in same lab I was in, again, a year or two ahead of me, but you get these connections you make with people that have moved on. It's kind of cool. You have these people to fall back onto down the line. So this is a quote from a student from Psychi online. Grad school isn't hard; it's hard work. There's not a day that passes by that I think I'm faced with a task I don't know how to do. But there are days when I wonder how we'll get it all done. I still have those days. But yeah, you do. You have a lot to do, but you get it done. I mean, there are students that do drop out and they get, most grad programs don't want to run you out, but there are times where that does happen. There's just not good fits. It's just some students burn out and just can't handle it. But in general, I mean, most students do finish and you get out of it and you find ways to make it happen as we do in life, as you guys do now as students. It's kind of the same thing. All right, so let's move to selecting a school, kind of knowing where do you want to go to school at. So kind of knowing what school to begin with is, I joke when I say this in the beginning, but knowing what you want to be when you grow up, there is some truth to that. You're all psychology students, right? When you go to grad school, or even if you're not psych, if you're a related discipline, if you're sociology or anthropology, whoever else we invited, you want to grow up, you want to be a sociologist, you want to be a psychologist, you want to be an anthropologist, whatever your major is. But you got to specialize when you go to grad school. See, we don't come out saying I'm a psychologist. I come out saying I'm an experimental psychologist or developmental psychologist or social psychologist, whatever. So you have specializations, or if you're in CrimJ, you got specializations over there. So you got to kind of figure that out. To do that, you take classes. That's why we have you take classes. That's why our program has you take 2 area 1, 2 area 2, 2 area 3, and you all have electives. You got to do one elective course. You got required classes, but on WSU electives, you can use those to take more psych classes or related discipline classes. That's how you figure out what you want to specialize in later. You're looking at these different pathways, talking to professors, etc., reading online, whatever, looking at research articles, you come up in classes, you might find an area you're kind of passionate about. That's important because when you're applying to grad schools, you got to apply to schools that have that area you want to work in, not just saying social psych, but what specifically within social psych. And we'll get to that a little bit later, talk about that. So grad schools are, it's a bi-directional relationship here. Grad schools are looking for the students that are right for them, but students, if you don't get anything out of this, listen to this tonight. Students have to look for the programs that are right for them too. It's both directions. They may think you're going to fit nicely in there, but if you look at that program and be like, yeah, I can't work with this individual, or I don't like the way the courses they require, or this or that, that program's not going to work for you. That's why sometimes students end up bailing out. Now, those students that bail out of a grad program might reapply elsewhere and go in someplace else and be successful. But you got to spend as much time investigating the research, the grad program, to see if it's something that a program you can survive in. You're going to spend 4 to 6 years of your life in it. You want to make sure you can be comfortable there during that time. So again, they look at you to make sure you're the right fit, but you have to look at them to make sure they're the right fit also. It's like same when you're applying for jobs. I tell students when I take my Psych 201 class, the degrees and careers, you guys get all worked up when you go for interviews because they're interviewing you. You don't realize you're interviewing them too, right? Think about that for a second, because you might walk in there and say, I don't want to work with these crazy people. Something like that. Seriously, you might not like the environment. You don't like the work. I mean, you really have a situation like that. So I think when you look at it like that and you realize they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them as much, I think that takes away a little bit of the stress you have on you when you realize that. And like I said, it applies to jobs. Our focus is grad programs tonight, but the stuff you're doing when you interview here, you do the same thing in jobs too. So it's a lot of parallels to what you're going to do in job interviews and applying for jobs to what you're doing over here too with grad programs. So, okay. So how do I determine which program is best suited for me? Look at who's been recently admitted. They have that, they publish all that data. Look at the students, where they come from, their background, GRE scores, GPAs, things like that. The track record, how many students go into this program and are successful with it? How many, don't succeed? If they have a high attrition rate, you might want to be worried about that, because maybe there's something with the program that students get turned off and leave. So just because these grad student, there was attrition and left the program, they could have left their own accord, their own decision. It may not be they got kicked out or something like that. That does happen on occasion, but it's usually in programs where you're not making sufficient progress. Maybe you take their statistics classes and you fail them. That's where one of the students in my cohort got kicked out. She failed statistics and tried it again and failed again. And you can't get a doctorate or master's degree in psychology without having statistics as a background. That's kind of pretty important. What the goals and objectives of the program are, I mean, you want to kind of look at that and make sure that kind of matches up with your goals and your objectives for what you want to do with your career. Financial resources, you could have the best program in the world, but if they don't want to give you any type of financial support, giving you a TA-ship where you're getting funding, they're maybe giving you in-state tuition after your first year. That's what WSU does. So for out-of-state grad students, after the first year, you have to apply for in-state residency. And once you do that, you get the lower rate for your tuition. And then that's mostly waived anyway. So the department picks it up. There are when you apply to them, they don't have any of this stuff. They don't give you TA-ships. They don't waive your tuition. You're paying outright. You're taking out student loans. So you got to look at that and think about that. So when you're applying, if you apply to a school that doesn't do those things, if you don't get anywhere else and that's going to be your backup, then maybe go with it. But if you get other options where you got PhD programs or master programs and you're getting some level of support, and you get more of that support with PhD programs and master programs, but if you're getting support someplace else, take it there. It's going to save you a lot of student loans down the line. The culture of the program, kind of look at that. How do people interact with one another? If they offer you the chance to visit campus, go for it. So you can see those things. How do the grad students interact with one another? How do they interact with faculty? Does anybody seem like they're miserable and hate everybody else, or everybody gets along really well? They don't have to sit around singing Kumbaya either every night, but you want something where they're getting along generally well with one another. But what's the culture? Is it a environment where grad students look like indentured help and that's it, and they don't see them making positive contributions to the program? Look at that kind of stuff. That's important to think about. And then specific course requirements, what actual courses did you have to take? What did they expect for that? Again, it goes back to that thing where if you don't get an A, are you failing out? Or is it a case where you could get Bs, but you have to limit how many? Most programs are going to allow Cs. So C's, D's, or F's basically. So, but you got to look at that, any margin of error in case you have a bad class, it happens, is there going to be an A and out, or is there going to be a B's okay if you have one or two of them here and there over time? But that's it. And then what courses they want you to take is what I was getting at too there. So when you're looking at the type of program, think about your chosen career. What do you want to go into? Again, you want to make sure you find a program that can prepare you for your career down the line. If you want to go into some type of counseling psych area or general counseling, and you want to work with a certain group of people, maybe family or something like that, or married couples, make sure that program can actually support that and help you develop that. Is an MA or MS an intermediate step? Um, Maybe when you're applying to a PhD program, maybe sometimes it's better to go with the master's route, especially if the PhD programs are highly competitive. What you could do is you could, oh, I misread this slide. It's a master's and doctorate. Yeah. So some areas you can get master's degree in, some areas you need doctorates in. I'll give you an example, school psychology. School psychologists, you can typically get by pretty well within a career with just a master's degree. PhDs don't really give you much more. So masters works out pretty well, and they're easier to get into. They tend to admit more students. Um, but if you're going into clinical psychology, you're going to need a PhD. So you can't do much with a master's degree at all. Your choices in terms of your master's and doctorate, see what the program has. Some programs like ours are really terminal PhDs. We don't allow terminal masters. If somebody comes in, we have had people come in and leave with a master's and just step out. Again, when we bring you into the program, we're expecting you to actually go all the way and finish to a PhD. But look at the choices if you can have the option, if you have to. The other question that comes up is PhD versus PsyD. If you're going more like clinical direction, PhD is the research degree more so. PsyD is a professional degree in psychology. It's really looking at preparing you for professional jobs. It's not as heavy into research training as the PhD is. If I had to choose between PhD or PsyD, I would go to PhD route. You don't know what you're going to do down the line. You might want to teach, or you might decide later you want to do some research while you're in clinical practice. And if you don't have that PsyD, it might be difficult to go that direction. PsyDs tend to be a little bit easier to get into, but it's kind of, I think within the field, it's kind of looked down on a little bit. So it is an option, but I would say if you're going to go direction, go to PhD, be the safe route. Even if you get done with your PhD and you never dabble in research again, that's fine. At least you have it in case, and it's regarded a little bit better. Location. This may sound stupid, but this actually is important. One of the reasons why one of the students in my cohort ended up leaving, she was struggling in the program from the start, but she also came from Texas. And when she got here, she wasn't expecting the weather to get up here in the Northwest. So it was no joke. She had a lot of seasonal affective disorder going on. The snow started coming in now, but the snow started coming in and the cold temperatures, and she wasn't used to that from Texas. So location is important to consider. Where do you want to live? You are living there for a period of time. If a lot of you have families, you're going to have to probably, if you're going to the program, which most of the graduate programs in psychology, you're going to be face to face when. There are some online programs for master degrees, but if you want to go into clinical psych, you've got to go in person. APA doesn't even accredit any online programs. So because you got to have face-to-face mentorship, you're going to have to be working with clients. They're going to have to see all that stuff. You're going to have externships and things. There's a lot of stuff going on there that they need you there for. So it's something to consider. But where do you want to live? You're going to be there, like I said, 4 to 6 years. Where do you want to live? Where are you going to feel comfortable at? For some people, that doesn't matter much. For others, it does. Your mentor means everything. Wherever you're applying to, make sure the mentor is the person you work with the most. Yeah, you're meant to be independent and figure things out on your own, but you do meet this person on a regular basis. You're going to sit down with them. You're going to make sure you like this person. So when you're looking at people on paper or looking at the internet, I mean, it's hard to tell who they are. So you have a chance to talk to them. If you have a chance to go meet them, it's very important that you do so to make sure it's somebody you want to work with. Before I get to number 3, not just the person, but any other grad students in the lab. So that's why it's a good idea to visit, because although the mentor might be fantastic to work with, the grad students you're going to be with every single day, every day, all day long, they might be, people you don't want to be with all day long. They might be abrasive personalities, or they could be the greatest people ever. And the mentor may not be the best, but the people could be fantastic. The grad students you're going to be with. And so you got just a little support from other sources to tie in the 3 now. They become your social support network. So when you're having those tough moments, you're going to rely on them. You're going to lean on them for support, because out of everybody else in your life, they're the only other ones that actually know what you're going through. anybody who's never been in grad school can't even relate to what you're going to go through. There's nobody in undergrad who can tell you that. There's nothing we do in undergrad to prepare you for grad school. And when I talk about things like the experience itself, like when you have your preliminary examinations, when you're sitting down and you're getting tested in an area and you got to remember, like, there's some, early on, there was a comment about memory. You have to remember a lot of stuff. You do. But I mean, when you get to those types of tests and stuff like that, they ain't nothing undergrad that complicated where you have to do that. So it's kind of hard to know what to prepare for. So those grad students, they've been in the program a little while, they'll know what to tell you, they'll know how to guide you through it. So that support from others is important. But you could have family too supporting you. If you brought your family with you, there'll be there to support you. If you're there by yourself, you can call your family back at home. That's important. The social support network will get you through those moments where, and everybody has them. I had it too. Those moments of weakness when you're like, I'm like, why did I do this? And they're the ones that can get you through it. When you're applying to grad schools, apply to more than one school. Don't apply to too many. I've always gotten told if you apply to too many, they can see that somewhere, and it looks like, I know it looks bad too. What's the right number? I think this around 6 or 7 or something like that. Don't go too crazy. More importantly, it's expensive. Applying to grad school is expensive, so you can shell it out hundreds and hundreds of dollars doing this. So be careful with that. But if you do one school, you're throwing all your eggs in one basket, and if you don't get in, you have no options. At least if you have about 7 or maybe 8 schools, something like a 6 to 8, let's say, at least then you have some options. If you don't get in one place, someplace else, I mean, you can kind of, if you get in multiple places, you can see what's the best offer. That's where going back to things like what financial package are they giving me? Are they giving me TA support? Are they waiving tuition? Are they giving health insurance? Things like that. You can go back and look at that kind of stuff. So if it's one school and you get in, great, but you got to take whatever they give you. If it's one school and you don't get in, you have no more options for a year. Okay. So Leah, do you want to, is any questions anybody has right now? So we don't get too ahead.
I think we're going to filter through the questions at the end and just save everything so that we can, unless you want to take a brief break and we can kind of do a couple questions that were up.
I mean, on anything up to this point, not anything ahead.
Yeah. Roy, do you want to jump on and ask a couple questions that we've got in the
Yeah, absolutely. Let me back up here. So we got some questions. We have a lot of questions, and we're trying to sort through some of the ones that will be the most meaningful. So we do have some questions on like experience and I'm going to focus on some experience and application questions for you, just based on where we're at in the presentation. One of the questions, and I know you covered it a little bit, is actually I want to put it right at the top. Is statistics this is from Erlene. Is statistics something that is required to be completed at all levels of academic learning, master's and doctoral too?
Yeah, generally, because at master's level, you got to do a thesis. And then at doctoral level, you do a dissertation. So to do those, if you're going into a PhD program outright, see if I can get on camera right. If you're doing a PhD program right, you're starting here. That's not the handle sharp, but you're starting over here. You do your first couple of years, you get that statistics class in, you do your thesis here. Once you're done with your thesis, then you keep moving on to your doctorate. You don't retake more statistics. Well, you have like our 311 statistics class. We have 412, which is another kind of statistics class, tests and measurements. At grad level, you can take your basic like equivalent of grad level of 311, which at WSU is 511. So it's the grad version of what you all do in 311. If that makes sense, I'm not confusing anybody on mine. Your grad programs, you have more different level grad classes. There'll be more maybe honed in on specific types of analyses and classes. You at that point, what you take after that is kind of like your electives within your program. You're taking to kind of match whatever you want to do long term career wise. But yes, statistics is important at both master's and PhD level.
Great, that's a great question. Thank you. The next one is I'm going to pick this one from Nancy. Due to life, if your GPA is not 3.5 or higher, is it possible to get into grad school?
Yeah, you can. I mean, we'll talk about this stuff coming up here in a little bit, but you can get in with 3.0s, maybe 3.2s. I don't think I would go much below that. It'd be hard. Depends on how many students are applying that year, what the caliber of the student is. You could apply like this year to a program like that with say a 3.0 and get rejected, and apply next year and get accepted. It depends on who they're bringing in that year, what your competition is, and that's no way to know that. So I would say try to strengthen as much as you can. If there were extenuating circumstances that led to a lower GPA than you were hoping for, you can explain it. I'll talk about your personal statement here in a minute, but you could do it there. You could give them a context statement too on the side, anything like that. If they bring you in for an interview, you can talk about it there. I can pretty much guarantee you they're going to ask about it.
Great answer. Thank you. The next one, I'm gonna just pick two more just for the purpose of time. Actually, this one's related to research assistant positions. Will those be returning to Global Campus next fall? And I'd imagine that factors into some of this, what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll get to that too.
Okay. Next one is obtaining clinical experience necessary during undergraduate for grad school?
Clinical experience, like actually, actually, what you could do there is like working on a crisis helpline, stuff like that. Be good experience. We don't have it on the global side. We could maybe down the line. I'm looking at trying to get it, but the what is it? It's like 444 clinical helping skills, I think it's called. That would give some of that experience. We don't have it right now, but the person that teaches an employment, I have engaged in some conversations with him about finding a way to develop that online. So that would probably require synchronous meetings. So that's our program is generally asynchronous, so that'd be a little more challenging. But yeah, any experience helps. So, but is it required? No, they don't expect you to have it, but you can get it in some ways, not completely the way you're describing it. You get it some other ways, so you're showing you can work with clients, you can help people, counseling and stuff like that. Do like the helpline if you take some coursework in that area, etc.
All right. Thanks on that. I'm going to ask one more question and I'll hand it back to you, Lee. If this is from Amanda, is it helpful to email potential PIs before applying to programs or mentor?
People, yeah, actually, I'm going to get to that. Let's hold that question.
Excellent. Okay. I think I'm going to hold off for now just for the purpose of time, and we'll save the rest of the questions, some of those to the end.
Yeah, I know it's not the way you guys wanted to do this. I figure break it up. I don't want to be lecturing at you all either. So we get this section done. 4 would be on what they do in the backside. Maybe I'll do those 2 together, and then I'll take a break. You can take some more questions. I'll take some more if you want, and then the last section be on the opportunities, which is some of what everybody was asking about. Okay, so applying to grad school. So you're not the only. I think nobody realize. I think you all realize this. When you apply to grad school, you're not the only one applying. The point of this, I know you all know that, but the point is they tend to have far more students applying than they're actually going to accept. So I'll give you an example. I found out, I think it was last year, UW's grad program, their clinical psych program, had about 1,000 applications. Anybody want to guess how many they admitted? It was 20. So our program gets clinical gets about 500 to 600 a year. We admit about 8 to 10. So there's of those 1,000 or the 600, whatever the number is, there's probably hundreds of students that applied that shouldn't have. They really weren't qualified, or maybe just didn't have enough in the rest of the time to justify it. There are definitely, let's say, at least 100 of those students were should be in grad programs. I mean, they're obviously deserving of it. You got to find ways to stand out. So you got to realize you got anything you can do to make yourself stand out. You've got to definitely do. Hearing that number I didn't realize you don't get that many, but it was 1,000. So it was crazy. That's about every year for them. So what application materials do you need? You're going to have to do a grad school application, just like you guys did it on the grad level. Most departments have a separate department application too. That's not always the case in some universities, but in generally it is. You're going to have to send transcripts over from your undergrad education. At that point in your career, you shouldn't be sending high school ones over, but there need any undergrad institution you went to, if you went to more than one. Application fee, most universities have it. It varies in amounts. I don't even know what it is right now. I was like $60, $80 when I was applying years ago. I can imagine it's close to 100 now. CV, you want to have some cases a cover letter, some cases not, but CV for sure. Your personal statement, your due, I'll talk about that later. Your GRE scores, you're going to need those in most cases. I'm saying I really didn't take in most cases off. It was during the pandemic, they were waiving the GRE. I think that's pretty much over now. And that's because nobody could take the GRE because of the pandemic. But the pandemic's been over for a while. And I think at least in the last year, most grad programs required a GRE. GRE psychology subject test score. I know some of you aren't psych students, but if you're not psych, don't ignore that. Actually, don't ignore that, because whatever you're going into field, you could have a specific subject test too. a lot of fields like biology, chemistry, whatever, have subject tests. So you might have one still, but psychology, there is one. Not every grad program requires it. Okay. Letters of recommendation, that's almost standard across any grad program. Typically, programs ask for 3. These cannot be from your family member telling how wonderful you are. You are wonderful, I'm sure. But the grad program, your family has to say that. So they don't want that. They want them mostly from faculty you had classes with, maybe an advisor you knew really well. That would be I wouldn't necessarily go with an advisor if you can avoid it. But definitely faculty you've had more than a class with. I'll talk about recommendation letters here more in a bit. If you've had some relevant work experience, almost to what your question Roy asked earlier, have you got that clinical stuff, Roy, you said? So if you got some type of really good relevant experience, like maybe you worked at that crisis hotline, a lot of our students have, by the way. I bring that up because a lot of our students at WSU have worked for those crisis hotlines and the national ones. Yeah, get a recommendation letter from your supervisor. That actually might be a stronger letter than even coming from some faculty member you had. But you need to have those. Not all programs have interviews. Some of them are over the phone. Some could be through Zoom. With COVID, a lot of the interviews with Zoom. They could be in person. If they're in person, sometimes they will fly you out, put you up and everything. Most likely you're doing it yourself, and they'll tell you have to come out for an interview and you've got to pay for it. So a lot of programs are doing that because budgets have been really tight across the country in most universities. Oh, sorry, writing sample. Not all programs ask for this. I sometimes when I was applying, I put them up anyway, just so they had a writing sample. But a lot of them, sometimes they ask for writing samples. Not all will, but have one ready from a good class. If you wrote an article for like I don't know, $4.99, or you did one in 312 or something like that, or if you're not in, if you're in sociology, whatever your equivalent methods course was, something like that, or a bigger paper in a class like a lit review, definitely include something like that. And that's generally what's recorded. I saw some of you had questions on that, like what did you actually have to submit? That's generally what's required. I don't think there's anything I'm missing. If anybody has anything, you can say it, but I think that's everything right there. Again, that's more than most require. If somebody asks for every bit of this, that's kind of rare. But at some point, you're going to get, if you do enough schools you're applying to, you're going to submit all this at some point. So some general admission requirements for grad programs in psych, for instance, and if you substitute psych with whatever your relevant area is. So undergraduate coursework in psychology, significant. So you're like, what does significant mean? You have electives, WSU electives, use them in psych if you can, take, or maybe a related field, like if you were go into something, if you're doing a dual major in CrimJ and psych, and you're going to go into forensic psych down the line, significant coursework would be psych / CrimJ, psych / sociology, whatever. Do those tougher classes too. They do look at that kind of stuff. You want to get research experience if you can. And as I say that, I can't have, it would be impossible for me to have all students in the online psychology program or whatever come over and do 499s. I'll talk about later. There's just not enough. There's not enough of me to go around. Let's just say that right now, and see if we can get more. I can only supervise or mentor so many students, but if you can get the experience, we will. And we're trying to branch that out for some things that I'll talk about maybe later. GRE scores, you want to do as well as you can, obviously. Most of the programs focus on the verbal and the written parts. I don't think analytical is as critical for psychology. At least it wasn't quantitative. I mean, quantitative and verbal, I meant, sorry. And then other factors that could weigh in, you need, research experience, but if you do get some of that relevant experience working in the area, that's going to be beneficial. If you did do master's work before you went into, say, a PhD program, that's great. That actually gives you a significant leg up too, by the way. So sometimes I think there's a slide coming up on this, but sometimes if you do a master's first and then go into a PhD program, it ain't the most ideal situation. Yeah, I do have a slide. I'll talk about it here in a second. Let's just hold off on that. So what do you do in your freshman and sophomore years? What can you do? Determine if you're going to get a PhD for your field. Some fields, like I said, master's works perfectly well. If you want to go into school of psychology, you really don't gain anything that much from a PhD. It might give you a little more supervisory kind of responsibilities early on, but you're gained those over time. That, what I just said, is not true of clinical psychology. You need a PhD. If you're going into things like social psych, you're going to need one. Developmental, you're going to need one. But some of the areas, maybe counseling, you can get away with a master's. You can get, and in some, like I said, school psychology, really the master's is definitely all you need to go. Focus on your early coursework. Get all your prerequisites out of the way. Focus on your GPA. I'll talk about how grad programs screen later. The easiest way to get rid of applicants is on GPA. So if you keep your GPA up there high enough, you don't have to worry about being cut real quickly. Second year, gain experience as much as you can, and as research assistants, teaching, grading as much as you can. I know some of the other departments in global don't have these opportunities. Some of the ones we do have in psych could be open to other students too. So I mean, some of it don't rule it out exactly. Some of the opportunities I'll talk about, like Psych Club, you can get involved in and gain some experience. But these student groups like Psychi, our officers here, an example of that. And there you go. It's number 4. So join these groups if you can. The other majors, some of you do have other groups within your department. You know, if you have a National Honor Society in your area, if you got like a sociology club or something, get involved in it. Getting any type of experience as an officer goes a long way. It shows leadership experience. In your junior year, take your GRE generally. If you take it, then if you don't do as well as you want to, you can always retake it again. Have your professors and current grad students look over your cover letter, your CV, any personal statements you're going to have. Try to get that all kind of worked out. The personal statement could be a little bit difficult at this point because a lot of grad programs have specific personal statements they want you to do. So you might have to write a different one for this school and a different one for that school, but maybe 3 other schools share the same general prompt you can across those schools. But some of that general stuff you can have somebody look over, give you feedback on early on, and help you get that better kind of figured out, identify what schools you're going to have a good fit for. Over the summer of your junior, senior years, contact potential mentors. Somebody mentioned this, Roy, I think you asked something about this somewhere. One of the questions, like, what do you do? How do you reach out to people? You want to contact potential mentors. You want to find out if there's a fit with the individual, if they're taking grad students or not. Not every faculty member takes grad students every year. I've done this mistake. I didn't know that. If you apply and they're not taking grad students, you get immediately rejected. You could be the most promising student on the planet, you will get rejected. So if they're not taking somebody, and I had this happen, I applied to University of Kansas. I wanted to work with C. Daniel Batson, who was famous for quest orientation for religiosity. And when I applied, I thought I was strong enough candidate. I really wasn't at the time. So I got rejected because I wasn't strong enough. I applied a couple years later. He still was there. I was then qualified. He was in phased retirement. So he wasn't taking on students. So in some faculty, just say they only get to take on students like every other year or something like that. You got to make sure they're actually taking on students. So if you contact them, you can find it out. Sometimes that information is actually on the department webpage. You can see that, like ours has it listed for our faculty. Send them your CV so they can see what you're doing right now. That actually might spark up an interest. I did that with my mentor at WSU, Dr. Parks, Craig Parks. Most people in our department don't know who he is anymore because he's kind of slid out of the department into administration. But when I did that, he saw that I worked for Paul Costa and Robert McRae on 5-factor model theory and NIA. When I was working for National Institutes of Health, I was working at NIA. And he saw I worked for him directly for a while, and it struck up a conversation. And I got on his radar, and it was like, hey, this is somebody I really want to talk to. And he was in the middle of doing a grant with Dr. Costa at the time, and they got talking about me. So at that point, I already knew I basically got in. So you something you think is insignificant might be something they focus on and think, oh my God, that's really kind of cool. And you kind of get some common ground with the person on that. It gets your name in their mind by contacting them and, establishing that, yes, there's a reason to work with them. They are taking grad students. You've got good fit. You send them your CV. When they're looking at all the applicants later on, they're going to remember, hey, I remember that Lee Daffin. He was pretty cool. He was working with, they're going to remember that kind of stuff. That's going to give you some kind of leg up over everybody else applying into that program. Senior year, September, take the GRE if you haven't yet. I really think if you waited this long, that's kind of getting risky. You could do that over summer too if I didn't have it there. But you want to try to get that GRE. Maybe you did take it junior year, but you want to retake it for higher scores potentially. Do it early enough that you can do that. October, list of programs you want to apply to, schedule visits if you can ahead of time. That may not be practical. Some of you applying to schools in the area where you're at. So you could make an arrangement to go visit the school and meet everybody there. Remember, they need you as much as you need them. And I can tell you from experience at WSU, we don't have enough grad students right now. We desperately need grad students. And so, yeah, I mean, right now it's almost of a situation where we almost need the students more than they need us. What we do need, well, it's birth in actuality, but we need the grad students too. I mean, they're there, they serve a purpose, they help with grading, they help with the department, they help continue on the program down the line. So you're just as important to them as, you know, as they are to you. So November, request your, this actually could be too, or you might do this earlier. Let me just say that. Request transcripts be sent to these schools and ask for your, their transcripts are fine, but ask for your letters of recommendation. Some programs have due dates in November. So I guess the rule of thumb, I think it's one of my next slides, is try to give your, whoever's going to write your letters at least a 30-day kind of notice. You need a letter. It's very hard to write these letters on the fly, very difficult. And then write your essays and mail them off, or your materials, or submit them online. Most of that's submitted online now. But sometimes you got to mail stuff too, but get all your stuff in is the point. Some programs, if they have a December 1st deadline, like today, you already have to have all that stuff done. Some programs have December 15th, some have January. Master programs might have dates in January, February when they're due. PhD programs will be due like now. So I already have students submitting stuff now that need to be turned in. So, for recommendation letters, who do you ask? In terms of who do you ask, you want to have somebody that you've had one in the class with. If you're asking somebody you only took a single class with, we have to actually state how long we knew you. And so I think that's, yeah, I'll get to that. We have to say that if we say we didn't know you in any real way, or we only had you for a class for a semester, that reduces the weight of the letter. So when the grad programs see that, they see that I really didn't know you, how am I commenting? They tend to toss that out right away. So you got to be careful with that. You want to ask somebody you've had multiple classes with, maybe you've done TA-ing with, and that's some of the stuff I'll talk about here in a little bit. When you ask, I just kind of address that at least 30 days before the first due date. And I know sometimes people run across programs that they don't know they're going to want to apply to, and they have earlier dates than they expected. That happens. What do you send to the person? When you ask for this, send them your CV and your unofficial transcript. Okay. That's really important, because when I'm writing a letter, I want to look across your CV, because I may forget some way I knew you or some way I worked with you. Your CV would have it on there. If not your CV, your unofficial transcript. Well, I'm going to look across and say, oh yeah, I know the name. Like for me, instance, I know most of the students' names because I look at rosters and stuff all the time, but I might forget that I had you in an actual class or something. So that'd be kind of important to know. What we have to report again is how long we knew you and what capacity. If it was only I knew you for 4 months as a student in a class of 80 and didn't interact with you very much, the letter has no weight. So it does not help you at all. In fact, it can actually work against you. So that's really important. I've asked students all the time, I get them every semester. Hey, I just took a class for you this semester. Can you write a letter? I have students sometimes that did like TA. They do it this fall and they say, I need a letter now. That's not enough time. Always, and grad programs will see right through that. If you're applying to a master's program, you can get away with that to some degree, and it depends how competitive the program is. But if you're applying to a PhD program, that's a kiss of death. And I'll get to talking about what they look on the backside. I'll talk about that here in a second. But there's always a question on whether you waive your right to review your letter. So the question is, what do you do in general? Waive your right, because if you don't waive your right, you're telling the person writing the letter, I can get to see your letter. And a lot of instructors, or letter writers, I should say, will be hesitant to want to do a letter in that case, especially if there's something you have to say that may not be positive for the person. But usually when you ask, if we feel like we can't comment adequately we'll let you know that. Or if there's some kind of red flag we see with your applying to a grad program, we'll let you know that ahead of time. And then that way you can turn down the letter from us. And we'll give you that right, or we're just turning down that right. I don't ever write a letter for somebody if it's going to hurt the person. So, but generally, if you waive your right, that makes it gives the faculty member or the writer ability to write more honestly on you. The personal statements are probably the most difficult part of the process when you're applying. And this has always been the part, honestly, I've struggled with. And they're really I don't know, a lot of the programs have them really specific to something they want to know about with you in. Figuring out where to start is kind of half the process. Once you get into writing it, it should be okay at that point. But they're they're looking for your writing ability, but they're also looking for other things. Um, Almost all grad programs require them. I don't care where you're in, what area you're in. Almost all of them want personal statements. They are kind of your opportunity to tell yourself, tell the grad admission committee about you, any unique skills and abilities you have. If you've had a situation where maybe you didn't do as well one semester as others, you can talk about that. It lets them see your interests, your abilities, your passion for whatever you want to go into. Passion within reason. So when you want, I'll get to that here in a second, but you want to tell them about what makes you unique or stand out. These are some things that these are some writing prompts they've used before. Contributions you can make to their program. Are you qualified to go to grad school and be accepted? Are you going to like it kind of getting into that is how likely do you think you're going to be successful at finishing grad program? What coursework you've done at the undergrad level? Again, if you took those more challenging classes to get you ready for grad school, that looks really good. Serving, if you did a TA or research or job or practicum or volunteer work or internships or whatever, anything like that, you can write about that volunteering at the crisis line, that's useful. Why did you choose a specialization to focus on? What your career goals are, rewards or distinctions. These are all things you can talk about in this letter. Most of them allow you to do that. But you want to figure out your purpose for writing it, determine the content you're going to have in it, how your approach is going to be, what style you're going to use. You want to talk about yourself, your facts about yourself, that anything that ain't going to stand out in your CV or application materials, your other reference letters you're getting, anything like that, something that's kind of unique that they're not going to see anywhere else. That's what you want to kind of share here. What makes a perfect personal statement? There is none. I mean, again, they take various forms. There really isn't a perfect one. I've seen them all different ways. I've written really good ones before, and I've written ones I'm like, oh my God. So maybe that's why I didn't get in. I don't know. That's like I said, it's the most challenging part. There is no perfect one. There's probably 1,000 different ways to write it, and all 1,000 are probably fine. And then to finish up the senior year, in January, you want to file your FAFSA, check with your professors to see if your letters were sent in or not. That was done. It probably should have been done by now. But you don't want your application sitting there incomplete because somebody didn't send something in because they forgot about it. We get lots of emails, and these grad schools send these reminders constantly. It's kind of annoying how many times they send it sometimes. So we can mistakenly delete it without realizing. By March, you should find out whether or not you've been accepted or not. You can start accepting declining offers, and then maybe April, celebrate you got into grad program or regroup and figure out your next steps for later that year when you get to apply again. If you don't get in, it happens. If you don't get in, contact the school and ask why. And then it might seem a little bit forward, but it's nothing wrong with doing it. You can find out on what grounds were you not accepted. You may not get accepted outright. You could be put on the wait list. I know wait list is a word that undergrads hate to hear when you're trying to get into classes, but it happens in grad schools too. I don't mean for classes, I mean for the actual grad program. So if you don't get in outright, you can contact them and ask, where on the wait list are you? I mean, you could be number one on the wait list. So if somebody that got accepted turns down the offer, and that does happen quite a lot, you have a pretty good chance of still getting in. But if you're like number 10 on the list, you're probably not going to get in. So working on improving your application, you can ask them, like, what did I do wrong? What can I improve? Maybe your personal statement was, off. Maybe they said you didn't do enough of statistics courses, or you could have had a stronger grade in your statistics class, or you need stronger letters of recommendation, or you go a master's route. They admit more students usually. So grad programs may admit 10 or so. I think UW said admit 20. Master programs may admit 20 to 30 a year. They get less applications or whatever. At least you have more of a chance of getting in. Don't do the following: write a damaging personal statement. Obtain harmful letters of recommendation. Sometimes they're so desperate for letters, which take it from anybody to get the 3 we need. Letters can actually be detrimental if they're weak letters. If you lack information about the program, like you're applying into the program, and they have a social program, so you're good there, but you want to do this research and nobody's doing it there, you're not going to get in. Communicate unclearly, have unprofessional looking writing. You got grammatical errors. Maybe if you're using APA formatting, you're using it incorrectly. Suck up. Don't suck up to them. Whatever you do, don't you're like, hey, I love this. Go into this person's research and you pull an article from the 80s and like, oh my God, that was phenomenal. They know you're sucking up, or suck it up. If you didn't do well in something, admit to it and, explain why in your personal statement. Maybe you didn't do as well in statistics, and maybe there's a reason why you didn't do well. You can kind of talk about that kind of stuff. Or maybe don't blame others. Maybe you just didn't do well because you just, weren't as prepared or something. You didn't take it as seriously. You may admit to that. You say, I'm working on trying to improve that. It might overlook stuff like that. Insider tips: take rigorous classes as you're going through. I know some of those classes, like 412, are kind of intimidating and want to take. If you guys have taken 333, the psychological disorders course, take 464. It ain't really harder. It's just the child psychopathology side is all it is. Do stuff like that, but take those more challenging classes. Do research early in your career. Don't wait. If you're doing it in your last year and your expectation is, yeah, I'll have research on my transcript, I'm going to do it that my senior year, that's great. We have to write your letters after in December. You're only 4 months into your research. You haven't even finished your research yet. I don't even know where it's going to go. I can't comment on it. So it's very difficult to handle that. Do it earlier, like maybe your junior year, and maybe expand later on it. Use your summer wisely. Maybe take classes, get relevant research, get relevant job experience, or well, not research, but get job experience. Maybe if you live close enough to, like, you're in the West Side, go try to work in a lab at UW or someplace over there, Seattle Pacific University. We got 2 grad students there from your program over there right now. So they came out of Psychi. You guys in Psychi knew who they are. So identify your cheerleaders, anybody who's going to, rally around you and, talk about your success and what you've done well, and they know you really well. Build your network of people. Maybe start contacting that person you want to work with early to kind of get in their network. Maybe contact another person at that university that you could also work with. You got to have a mentor, but when you're in grad programs, you have a committee. Committee is usually 3 members, and 2 of them are department and 1's outside. So if you make 2 connections right away when you're applying, they know, hey, you got 2 members of your committee. We just got to get that 3rd person, and you're not expecting to know that at that point. And then find your perfect match again with your mentor. So as perfect as it can get. Okay, so real quick, this section's a little bit shorter. The application screening process. I have no clue what time it is. Where are we at?
We're at 8:05.
Okay, I'm sorry.
8:07, excuse me.
Yeah, okay. I'll go to get this done a little bit quicker. Application screening process. So grad schools, we receive a lot of applications. They got to screen them out initially. They look at GPA, GRE, make sure you got the cutoffs they're looking for there. If they're looking at psych GREs, if they take them, they might look at that real quick. But they're initially screening on that information alone. They're going to take people with insufficient GPAs or GRE scores. GRE scores are not as predictive of your success in college at grad school as GPA is, but they do look at it. I don't know how heavily they're looking at it right now. I'm heard it's a lot less than what they've done in the past, but they will look at it. If you got a really low GRE score, they're going to probably charge your application on that. But GPA is what they're definitely going to look on. Then they look at your coursework you completed. Again, you didn't just take these little easy, you have a high GPA because you took easy classes all. So your GPA is inflated. They look at types of classes. Did you take like a Psych 412 test and measurement? That's a little more complicated, where you're learning psychometric stuff. Your letters of recommendation. Again, they're looking at the weights on the letters, like how much does this person really know you? They'll look at your personal statement, any experiences beyond the classroom, any TAs and research and all that, which I talked about here briefly. And then they'll look at your work-related experience, which what Rory was bringing up earlier. They'll look at your personal statement and kind of, did you articulate your understanding of your professor's research you want to work with? Whoever your mentor is going to be, do you really understand what they're doing? Do you really have a fit in what they want to do? And you got to have a fit. You could be the most qualified student on the planet. If you apply to Harvard or Yale and you don't have somebody there you can work with that's doing research and what you want to do research in, you'll be turned down. It ain't just simply your GREs and your GPA and all that stuff. They want to have a research fit. That's what they're looking at. Show you read previous papers, how you're going to contribute to the research, maybe not just replicating, but extending more so. And then any past research experiences you've had. They're looking for this kind of stuff in the personal statement. It could also be other places in your it could be in your transcripts. It could be in your GRE scores could reflect it somewhere, but they're looking for all this kind of stuff. Be a strong writer. They're looking for that because you do a lot of writing in grad school. And you're going to write a thesis. You're going to write a dissertation at some point. Dissertations can be hundreds of pages. So these aren't these little 10 here. your theses are gonna be 50, 60 pages at least, and then the dissertations, mine was about 400 pages. So you got to enjoy writing these papers too. If you don't like writing, this grant programs may not be the best place for you. And then again, the writing samples. In your writing in general, in your personal statements, don't submit with writing errors. I mentioned that earlier. Don't have these generic statements. My guy, don't have ChatGPT write your statement for you, please. Okay. I'm sure that's happened already, or with that, it will. Write about everything but research. If you look like you're avoiding the question, they're going to get worried about that. Overshare. Don't go into too much detail about your personal life. They don't want to know that. It can make them uncomfortable, and you might not legally be able to tell them some of that stuff. So be careful with that. Don't make lofty assertions about saving the world. Like, I want to go in there. My mom had, Alzheimer's. I'm going to come in here and save everybody else on the planet from it. Most people would never have any type of accomplishment like it in their careers. I mean, people do, but it's going too far. And then use humor. Don't use humor. Try to be kind of a little more professional when you're writing. Your research experience, what statistics, design classes, method classes did you take? That'd be our 311, 312, in the middle is 412. If you did RA, you're talking about that. Research assistant or independent research, do that. Research skills do you possess? Information literacy, quantitative literacy, scientific literacy, kind of those things. Look at the WSU's list of what they want you to learn, and as you come through your academic career, that stuff's kind of all highlighted in there. Did you do research presentations? Did you actually present at conferences? Did you go to the undergrad research symposium? Did you actually present in person? Did you do remote, whatever? Did you win an award? Stuff like that. And have you gotten any publications? They don't expect undergrads to have publications, but if you have them, it gives you a major leg up. And then if you have to do an interview, go to the campus. It's a good thing. Again, it's an opportunity for them to interview you, but you also interview them. But a lot of grad programs are requiring this now to avoid personality conflicts when you get to campus. Okay, so the last section, I'll take a couple minutes with this. Is that okay? Okay, Shelly's smiling. I got a thumbs up. Okay, let's do this because that's what a lot of you were asking about too. And Roy asked questions on this earlier, so I got to go over. It's not because of Roy. So, anyway, how do I stand out? So real quick, I'll go through this because a lot of you notice. If you don't notice, TA opportunities. We've got the three different. Well, we really have the two, grading TA and instructional TA. We do technically have psychology tutors. They're still in the books. I just haven't had any in quite some time. But the grading TAs do what it says. They grade work in classes. I've been trying to extend it a little bit. Actually, as we transition me out of online director later this year to somebody else taking over, one of the things we're doing is we're taking over who runs the TA program. And so they are going to be changing how we're doing this a little bit, but they're going to be grading instructional TAs, sort of. She's going to group them together. She's got Dr. Posey she saw it online one time already. She loved it. She loved interacting with the global students. She wants to stick around. She's trying to come over to it. She would have been over now, but we had a faculty member quit over the summer, and so she got stuck in 210, 311, and 312 concurrently in Pullman. So if you guys are taking those classes, you know they're rigorous. She's teaching all three at the same time, which is unheard of. But grading TAs will help with grading, so she's going to expand that a little bit. I'm starting to expand that now. Instructional TAs are the ones that do the teaching in the classes. A lot of you have seen those. You literally do 3 weeks of training, and then you facilitate 2 discussions the rest of the semester. And the tutors, we haven't had much on. If somebody has questions on that, I'll answer it later. But I haven't had a tutor. When I had them, they were only 311, and I haven't had in quite some time. Oops, what did I just do? Okay, so research experiences, real quick. We got the 2 main ones, 498 and 499. I have not had a 498 in quite some time, in about 3 years. But the research assistants, they assist me with my research. And then if you guys have read on the student resource room, you got 499, which is the ones we're running right now. We've got 01, which is lit review, and 02, which is hypothesis testing. So I'll let you read about that. I'll show you in the student resource room where this is briefly. But if you're going to apply, well, I'll do it right now. Then you want to go through and you can apply for both TAs and the research opportunities through the resource room. You get the applications there. Let me make sure I actually have it. Oh, there we go. Let me see if I have it up. Yeah. So if you guys go into the resource room, if you go into the student resource room, non-majors, you can't get into this. Sorry, it's the only thing I can't share with you guys right now, because they have only psych students in this. But if you go into it and you scroll down to conducting independent research, down in here you see the information, serving as a TA. You click on this and it will tell you about it. The applications are in here. So that's the areas right here that you want to look at. Okay, let's go back over to the presentation so I can finish this up. When you get the application email, and a lot of you have done that recently. After you, and I email out to you all letting you know that I'm open up for TA applications right now. You get an email like this telling you what training you got to go through. This is an email for research assistant. If you're doing a TA, you get the same type of email. If you're doing 499, same type of email. But basically, you can read about this. I'm going to skip through this because you can read this on. It's on there. But for lit review, it's a 2-semester requirement. You got fall and spring. So some stuff you do fall, some stuff you do spring. Same thing for hypothesis testing. That gives you an idea of what you're doing. In the fall, you're mostly for hypothesis testing. You're kind of getting your IRB paperwork done, your qualtrics ready to go, your intro method section written, and then you do data collection maybe later in the fall or into early spring. Mostly it's usually early spring because it's hard to get it done in the fall. And then you start getting your data collected, analyzed, get a poster ready for Circa that you present at Circa late March, and then you submit your paper by April. So student groups, you guys know about these. Obviously, you hear from Psychi. Psychology Club is the other group, but Psychi is, I hate to say invitation only, but once you meet the requirements, you get a list from the advisors, and then one of the officers would email you and let you know you've been accepted, and then you just have to go pay the $55 to National, and then you're in, and then you can be a part of the group. The Psychi does have officer positions, and that's a great way to get leadership experience. I would bring up Psych Club, but Psych Club's been dead for the last 2 years, almost to the point where we might have to disband it. So it's been no activity. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. We're trying to get it revitalized. I got a meeting in about 2 weeks about it too. And that decision is going to be made at that point if we get rid of it or not. I hope anybody that's in here that's interested in psychology as a whole, hold on, my mouth is so dry. You can join regardless of major. You don't have to be a psych major. That's why I don't want this going away. You guys that are not psych majors, if you don't have opportunities in your departments, you have one here. If you're interested in human behavior, you can join Psych Club. You could be the officer. You could be the president of Psych Club. Okay, you don't have to be psychology to be in it. So Andrea Donalworth of Global Campus, and we're going to talk about this and see if we can revitalize this. And then there's other opportunities like student government, ASWSU, and there were others within Global Campus, but I don't know how they exist anymore, so I'll leave it at that. The final remark, the final slide is be involved. You cannot get into grad programs if you haven't done something beyond classes. It's unheard of to get accepted. So get involved. So if you want some other resources, these are ones. The psychology department webpage has some really good resources. If you go to that website and then go under undergrad studies and graduate school resources, there's some excellent information there. And in the student resource room, I got stuff in there about getting into grad programs. And then American Psychological Association has stuff and does, they have online programs specific. They talk about online grad programs. So there are some challenges in online grad programs. And their master levels in some areas, they can have them online. PhDs are a little more difficult, but if you're going to clinical counseling, stuff like that, it's almost impossible to get into them. So I'll leave that up if you guys want to write it down. Any questions? I'm sorry it took a little bit longer. That's a long presentation. So my throat is dry.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Daffin. I'm just gonna pause here just to collect some of our thoughts here and go through some of these questions. But one of the things I wanted to ask right out of the gate that was in the chat was getting letters of recommendations from faculty members and some of the students. Like, what do you do with that when you don't have personal interactions with these professors?
Well, what you could do is if they have office hours, try to meet with them. A lot of our online instructors do have office hours. I know 311, Dr. Mazzoi, he actually does it's not a required session, but he does a regular meeting with the students when they get to each project. Go in there if you can, meet with him, talk to him, get to know him on some level. Try to be a TA in their classes. I select the TAs, but if you designate which classes you want and you give me a hint, like, hey, I really like to be a TA for this professor, actually what I would do is I would almost talk to the professor see if they're willing to take you on. They can let me know. You do an application, and I'll put you in with that person right away. Then you get to know them on a different level as a TA. So you can, and a lot of these online instructors, they meet with the TAs ahead of time to kind of go over the assignment and just kind of answer questions. I know a couple of them are doing that. Even if they don't do that and ask for it, you could request it. I know most of them, like Dr. Burley would do it, Dr. McGraney would do it. I mean, anything you can do to kind of talk to them on the side, do it, talk about research, whatever. I have a student doing 499 right now. He did that with Dr. Lane when she was with us. She left in the fall, or left after the spring semester, and they developed a really cool project together that now I'm working with him on. So anything along those lines, kind of get them to know you on a different level. It is hard. I know online students think because I'm online, nobody gets to know me. Let me tell you all something. I got students in my Pullman class. If they walk by me, I wouldn't even know they're in my class. They don't ever say anything. Sometimes they don't show up to class. So just because you're a face-to-face student doesn't mean the faculty member knows you any better. Let's say that.
I mean, that reflects some of my personal experience. The reason I got to know the professors I have actually have come through TA work, and it's aligned with research interests that you have. So like you just marry those together, and it works really well. One of the other questions we had was on, actually, this was an excellent question as well, was what about like gap year? Is what does it look like if you skip, going from undergraduate to graduate and take a gap year?
Just explain it. I mean, if you want time off, just explain it. I mean, when you're doing your personal statement, just say I took a year off to kind of regroup after undergrad, so I could come in the grad program, refresh. Or maybe I took a year off to gain some additional work experience. That actually, I know students fear that's going to hurt their application. That can actually help your application too.
That's really helpful to know, because I'm in this boat myself with grad school applications. This might help some of the people asking this question. There's actually a couple of universities who actually posted a research article that said sometimes taking a gap year is actually better because it reduces burnout in your going straight from undergrad to graduate. And I did see that on one of the actually Ivy League schools. One of these other questions in here was from let's see, I'm gonna pick let's see, where's this one? Oh, this is from Amanda, actually. Is double majoring viewed poorly when applying to PhD programs?
No, I don't see why it would. No, if anything, like I guess what's the concern there? Why do you think it would be looked poorly? I'm curious if she wants to speak up and ask or answer.
I read online that depending on like what you're double majoring in, that it can take away from like doing psychology coursework, and so it's frowned upon because it's taking you away from that coursework.
Maybe, I mean, some students do like a 5th year, and then they do additional coursework there, so they get the same amount of coursework. They just do another year on top of it. What's that, the super senior thing? Is that what they call it now? So I think it's what it is. But yeah, they do a little extra time or something like, or actually they do it in 4 years, but they're doing summer classes the whole way. So they're taking the extra coursework. So no, I don't think it works against you.
Yeah,
in some areas it might be good. It might be good because if you're doing like Crim J and psychology, the interface, or Crim J and sociology, or psychology and sociology, these areas all relate to one another. So you're gaining a really good wealth of information in that other area, in addition to psych or vice versa. That's going to make you a stronger candidate, I think, in many ways. So yeah, it's good, Roy. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. It reflects something Dr. Lane had shared with a couple of us and myself as well. Is like, if you're interested in social psychology, it's actually really helpful to actually have sociology courses because of another concept we're not going to talk about right now. But I'm going to continue down here looking for some of these questions. There's a lot of questions, and what time? How many questions do we have time for? Is because we have a bunch down here. I've highlighted a bunch.
Answer as many as we can, as long as everybody wants to stay on for a little bit.
Great.
We're at 8:24 right now.
This one's from let's see, Varinda. Does volunteer work look good on an application?
Depends on what it is. I don't think it hurts. I've had to tell students in 201 to list that kind of stuff. So like if you're volunteering at Big Brothers, what was like a big, like Boy Scouts or Big Brother and Sisters or something like that. Yeah, that looks good. I mean, anything you get like that, it just shows you're going above and beyond and contribute to your community, which is kind of why you do degrees in psychology a lot of times. So yeah, that can definitely help. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't. I don't see where it would hurt you. Let's just say that.
Okay, and then I'm going to save because there's a bunch of questions actually centered and clustered around master's degree, but I'm going to do a couple questions first, and then what I'd like to do is ask some of the questions that are related to master's versus PhD or PsyD.
Okay.
One of the questions is age a factor in acceptance?
No, you mean you have to be a youngin? Is that what you mean, or if
Yeah.
you're too old, they won't let you in?
Pretty much, and then like for those of us on this call, I'm 47 myself, so like, is age a factor in grad applications?
When I when I finished, I was in my late 30s. I was there we had students in their 20s. I was in my late 30s. No, I mean technically if they judge you on that as age discrimination, and most of the grad programs want to stay away from that. So no, I don't. If you're in your 40s, oh my God, you're dead almost, right? You said you're 47, Roy. You're almost dead. I'm 48. You're almost dead. No, not really. I mean, hell, if you get done with your grad program, you still got 20 years almost. You can still work. No, it's not. I don't think that's an issue. If you're worried about the age of the students, it ain't like sitting in an undergrad class like in Pullman where there's all these little teeny boppers. Yeah, that'd be weird. Grad programs, a lot of the students do tend to be a little bit older. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, there was a statistic that that on one of I think the University of Washington actually shared a statistic that basically said that the majority of their students were actually in that 40 area actually for a lot of grad programs. So I don't think you have to worry about that. What was this next one? Oh, okay. Before I get to the questions centered on master's programs, I'm going to ask one question that actually really stood out earlier on. This is from Ashton. What is the classic breaking point for graduate students? Is there a common breaking point in grad school? Basically, I guess where you would drop out.
It depends on the person. It's like what level of stress you can handle. I mean, maybe just the rigor, maybe your demands of your mentor or your major professor, that could be a problem sometimes. You might have somebody easy to work with, and it may be no big deal at all. It depends on the person. I think for me, what was it for me? It was brief. I think it was the prelims, preparing for the preliminary examinations. I was literally up working late every single night, trying to get ready for these. The preliminary examinations they're like evil. I mean, they're evil. I mean, they are, you get one of my preliminary examinations, Dr. Yurman, who's still at WSU, he's in business. He gave me 110 articles to review. I had to know all 110 articles too. So you have to know all the articles. You got to be able to take he just gave me 110 and said, figure it out. Something like that. So I had to go through all the articles, like what are the ones that have common threads in them? They're like on this topic, some are on this topic, some are this kind of nuance in this topic, kind of group them together. You know that chunking thing you all learn about? You're taking 110 articles and chunking them in ways that are meaningful so you can remember these group of articles go together, these go together, these go together. And then you go through and you try to remember what the salient points are of each of the articles. That's a lot of work, and you got to remember all that. You got to remember citations. You don't have to be exact, but you have to do a reference section at the end, and it's an 8-hour exam. So they give you a series of questions based on those articles, and you've got 8 hours to answer the questions, and you need every bit of it. My other preliminary examination was from Craig Parks. He gave me 25 articles. So which exam are you more afraid of, the 110 or the 25? Craig expected me to know every detail of these 25. Jeff didn't expect every single detail on those, but they both were equally, they just want to bang my head on something. I mean, it was that terrible. And there's nothing in your undergrad to prepare you for that. So that kind of process is usually a breaking point for most students, for grad students. It's just, there's nothing to prepare you for that from undergrad. And it's just the level of information you got to take in. It's just your head wants to explode. Some people, just like I said, get worked up over the research. I don't think the coursework gets most students. I think most of them realize they're going to have coursework. They can get through it. But you're not getting multiple choice exams in grad school. You're getting all essay exams. So, I mean, you got to be ready for that. If you're a good writer, I thrived in those exams. I handed in, talk about being cocky, when I was at WSU, I handed in one of my exams and I said, you don't need to grade it as an A. And the professor looked at me like, oh, really? It was an A. But I mean, he came back and said, it looked like I cheated because I mean, we were doing a test in the classroom. I had almost word for word everything that was said. I lecture for like 5 hours at a time. Sometimes I'm used to, I don't need notes. I can just go up and lecture. And So it wasn't a big deal. So classwork, I don't think is the issue. Is more so the research, the demands of research, the kind of pressure on you to produce for your dissertation, or if you're doing somebody else's research. It honestly, it's a vague answer because it really varies by person how much they can take before they break. It's whatever you're. That's why I said earlier in the presentation, you got to have good coping mechanisms. That social support, that's all critical. I hope that helps. It's not super useful, but I mean, it really does vary.
Gonna cut in real quick before I get to some of these master questions. For Leah and Lorraine, just for the folks on the call that are unable to continue attending to the rest of the talk and Q&A, there was a question on receiving credit. Is that something we can just really briefly just interject here?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity.
Yes.
Since we've technically gone over, I think I've been telling everybody that I'm marking them down as full, that they attended in full.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Class.
Yeah, because it's a very rare opportunity. Sometimes you have this many people with Dr. Lee together. We're just gonna move on forward to some of these other questions as this is really meaningful to people. Okay, so we did have a bunch of, well, I'm gonna find them real quick. Master's degree, where do they go? Okay, so what are the pros and cons of aiming for a PhD versus stopping at a master's degree? I think you addressed some of that already, but we had so many questions on master's degrees. I think it's worth reiterating.
The question was, what's the advantage of stopping your PhD?
Yeah, so what are the pros and cons of aiming for a PhD all the way through, like most programs have, without a terminal master's, versus stopping at a master's degree in a PhD program?
Most programs don't let you do that. You don't, if you're going to go into the program and your intention is to be terminal masters, when they don't allow that, really, I mean, you're not going to get accepted. They're going to just throw it out right away because they want people to go through to get the PhD, because that's how they measure success in the program. When you're going through the program, like at WSU, if you intend to go all the way, it's fine. You can opt to receive your master's degree as you're going along. It's not everybody does it. I don't know. It doesn't really mean anything at that point. Really, if you're going to keep going on, it doesn't. I came in with a master's, so I didn't have to do it. So I did that approach. I knew some that did get their master's and it continued on and got the PhD. It's more money to WSU or to university if you do it, because you're literally paying to get the extra degree. You've earned it technically, but you want it conferred. It's a little bit of a weird situation. Some universities don't allow it. So I don't know. If your intention is to go in and only get a master's and a PhD program, first up, if you got into a PhD program from the start, stick with it, because it's hard enough to get into them as it is. I mean, again, look at how many people get rejected. If you think you're only really going to go master's, just go to a master's program from the start. You have a better chance of getting in and be less stressed too. Does that answer that? I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I think it does. It really does. Here's another question. Actually, this is interesting. I'm not sure what this means, but Heather asked, will doing your master's first hinder a PhD program later?
Depends on how much later you're talking. If you do your master's first and then you kind of apply into PhD programs within a couple years, you should be okay. That's what I did. So I got my master's and then I taught for 3 years, almost 3 years at Towson University in Maryland. And then I started applying. I was also working at NIH at the time. So I was getting relevant experience and teaching experience. So it was time well spent. And then I started applying to PhD programs again. And at one point I wasn't sure because I had the master's, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go on. I initially did when I was an undergrad, but I was like, all that hassle of applying, it's a hassle. And I just like, do I want to go through it again? And then at some point I decided, yes, I did. And I tried again. And again, that's when I got in 5 to 6 schools. So if you're not sure if you're competitive coming out of undergrad right away, maybe go into a master's program and get accepted, get your degree. Why it's easier when I forgot to say this earlier, but when you then apply to PhD programs, you can move to the top of the pile because you've already demonstrated you can do graduate level work. So yeah, you have a leg up on everybody else that's applied into the program. So if there's 1,000 applicants and they only met 20, and some of those students had, master degrees already, they get put in that pool, that final pool almost right away because you've already proven you can do the work. Because also too, you've done a thesis at that point, so you've already proven you can do research. You've got relevant research experience. You've done graduate level statistics already at that point. So you've checked all the boxes they have about can you do graduate work? You checked them all. So it's almost a no-brainer.
Great. Is applying for a master's program any different than a PhD program?
Process is the same. The number of students they admit is a lot better. You still want to try to find a mentor because you still got to have a thesis committee, stuff like that. So really the process is the same, but they admit more students usually. You don't get as much help a lot of those programs financially. So a lot of that you're on your own. So that's the only thing, you're picking up student loans. Just be aware of that. So maybe apply to a couple master programs, PhD programs when you're applying to be safe. So at least if you get accepted to masters, if you get accepted to PhD also, just go PhD route. But if you don't get accepted to PhDs and you get a master's, at least you have an option.
And how many years does a master's program typically take? Was in the question.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's about 2 years.
Right.
Maybe 3.
Do you recommend any? I guess this is pretty broad because there's so many different areas of psychology to go into. But do you recommend any master's programs over any other? I'd actually bracket that. I would add on to that, like specifically with respect to the online experiences that we've had. Are there any master's programs over any others that you would recommend?
If they mean online, I mean, there's some information out there. I don't know. I do so many, most of these programs people apply to are mostly face-to-face programs. So it depends on what, like you just said, it depends on what area you're going into. So that's really too broad a question.
Okay. Let's see down here. So there's some questions down here. I'm not going to ask that one yet. Would you recommend having a PhD if someone is interested in becoming a behavior analyst? This is from Rorinda.
Yeah, you could. I mean, but I think there's master programs for that too. Applied behavior analysis. I think you can go master programs and do pretty well with that. It might be one of those areas where a PhD is not completely required. Like I said, in school psychology, you really don't need it. It's even kind of, I don't want to say frowned upon, but it really isn't necessary. It doesn't get like in other areas of psychology, having a master's or PhD really does make a difference. In school psychology, you make as much money almost either way, which is pretty good. So.
Okay. Leah, how much time do we have left here? Should we ask you like wrap it up with a few more questions? Or?
Yeah, if we can maybe just pick a couple more. We are having some people just leaving, but if we want to maybe pick maybe 3 or 4 more questions, and then let's kind of close the loop here. And yeah, how's that sound with you, Lee?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to ask this one down here because I think it was asked earlier in the chat session. Emily asked, wondering why a PsyD is looked down as compared to a PhD.
It's just because it doesn't have that research component. It's not as rigorous. But some students, they don't want to go into that. They just want to really do the counseling side or working with clients. And so maybe that's not a big deal. That's not to say you're not going to pick up research articles and look at them and stuff, but you don't have that research background, which really is fundamental. Understanding those research articles and really understanding what the researchers were doing or participating in that process. So that's why it just doesn't have the rigor that a PhD does.
Okay, I'm going to pick another one. I'm moving around right along. I'm trying to see if
that one from Hittis.
What's that?
Hittis Smith wrote.
Oh, yeah. I wonder why it is important to take a GRE during senior or junior or senior would be impactful if we take GRE after completing undergraduate. There's a follow-up question here. Also, how it will affect giving a year. What is that? Sorry, it's covered up. Break before. Oh, we already covered that one.
Yeah. It's not bad taking a GRE multiple times. I mean, don't take it like 20 times or anything either, but I mean, a couple times. Well, first off, that'd be expensive. But if you take it once or twice, I think twice maybe at the most, I think that's okay. And you can get higher scores. Some students, you do the practice exams, but until you do the real thing, you really don't know what you're getting into. And maybe you're under a lot of stress and pressure and you cave into it while you're taking the first exam. So taking it again can help you get higher scores because you take the highest scores in each part. And the junior year more so you have time to take it again. But if you take it senior year and you want to do all your eggs in one basket and you may nail it down, that's fine too. I wouldn't take it after your undergraduate career because you already would have had to ask for recommendation letters by then. If you try to come back to faculty or ask or instructors and ask them to write a letter after you've left already, we may not remember you. That's the problem with that. You want to have all that stuff kind of done ahead of time.
I'm gonna pull two more questions from here.
Let's do these Fight Club ones.
Yeah.
It's not, well, I mean, anybody can join it. Grad students get involved in it too. It's a legit, are you a grad student? Is that Zyka? Is that how you say it? She here? Or he here? I don't know if they're here still. It's open to undergrads. Oh, Leah wrote back to that. Oh, never mind. Leah wrote back to it. Never mind. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't see that, Leah. Sorry.
Okay. One of these questions, we had a couple questions related to this, and also some comments. Just like I think that the sheer volume of effort here and applying and whatnot, just like seem overwhelming for a lot of people. Having gone through that, and you have gone through it and been out the other side. I mean, can somebody keep a full-time job while working and doing grad school?
Yeah. I want to say no to that, but I didn't. I was actually adjunct faculty for University of Idaho. I taught all the intro to psychology sections at that time for 2.5 years. And then I was faculty at University of Phoenix all during that time, which nobody really knew here. So I did stuff on the side. The problem is when you're doing these other things, it takes away from time for other things you could be doing, like research. But I don't think it surprises anybody to know I was more focused on teaching than I was research. That's where I'm at now. So if you're talking about jobs like that could be relevant, like doing some teaching on the side somewhere locally, yeah. But if you mean like working a job at Home Depot while you're doing grad school, they're not going to allow it. You have to get special permission for it.
Yep, and I have seen that personally on some of these applications that made it quite explicit, actually. Let's see.
Well, they're going to want to know why you need to work when they're paying you. It's like the TA shift, they pay you like 20,000 something, 30,000 a year, whatever the number is. They're waiving your tuition. They're going to want to know why you need to work on top of it. And I did work, but I was doing stuff relevant to my future development. So that's how I got away with it.
I'll take this. I'll take this one other question because it was an interesting one. Was it like how do you get a publication while you're in undergrad and feeding into a graduate application?
How do you get a publication? I mean, it depends on where you're getting. If you're working with research on somebody, you can get a publication through them. Working on some faculty members' work. That's happened. One of the undergrads did have that happen. We were working on, it was Ashley Ann Jones. It was like 6 years ago. Her and I were doing research on proctored exams and their impact on students. And we actually got it published. And then we've been trying to follow up on it since then. And not that we had an article go in that went in right on the beginning of the pandemic, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And then when they went back and realized they never replied to it, they wrote back and said, you did APA format wrong. I mean, I'm a Ph.D. I know how to do APA format, but went from 6th to 7th edition during that time. So when I submitted it, 6th edition was fine. 7th, if you never noticed, it changed a lot. So they rejected it because they said I didn't know APA format. I'm like, are you serious? I mean, it was literally, I submitted it 1.5 years ago. I'll reformat it if you want, but it was stupid. It was something like that. And it was on student perceptions of proctoring services. Actually, it's kind of relevant. We were going to republish it. I just haven't had time. Give somebody who's doing research is probably the most typical way. Some of you do independent research. You could publish through a journal, like PsyChi has a journal, or is it a journal? Is it I think it's a publication. Yeah, they have something like it. You could publish there. It's going to be hard doing it yourself as an undergrad with you the only one on the list. That's going to be next to impossible to do, but it's hard for a lot of PhDs to get published. But trying to piggyback on something like work in a lab, if you can, where they're doing publications, you'll pick them up like that.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Daffin. I'm going to pull Leah back on here just because of the time. We're hitting about 8:45. We've gone quite a ways over. We've taken a lot of questions. Thank you so much for your time and to answering these questions. I really appreciate it. Leah, I'm going to take it to you and Dr. Daffin.
All right. Well, just want to tell everyone again to reiterate what Lorraine had said. If anybody has obviously everybody's going to get full credit. Anybody who stays till 8 or has. So we also just want to thank everyone. This has been a phenomenal turnout. and your participation in this is crucial to making further events like this happen. So please look out for more. We will be doing more like this coming up this spring. And a big thank you to Dr. Daffin Lee. So I want to give a big round of applause and for his time and how much he's done. So again, everybody, thank you. And it's been super informative. And if there were any questions, by the way, that you feel that didn't get answered, please email them to either Lee, myself, or anybody that is part of this, and we can put our emails up, or an email or something that can, a document can get formatted so we can try and make sure people, at least these questions are kind of filtered through. So we definitely want everybody to feel that their questions were answered. All right.
Yeah, I
well,
see
thank
quite a
you,
few.
everyone.
If you email them over, I'll answer them. If they email them, I'll answer them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.